Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating minds in modern business, Joe Liemandt, founder of Trilogy Software and ESW Capital, and now the force behind Alpha School, an education company that may end up being his most valuable creation yet. Joe became a billionaire in his 20s by building software, buying hundreds of companies, and turning them into profit machines. Then he disappeared from public life for nearly 2 decades and re-emerged with a mission to reinvent how humans learn. This episode today isn't going to be about education. It's about how great operators think, how to set quality bars that never erode, and how to rebuild broken systems from first principles. Whether you buy HVAC companies, SaaS firms, traditional businesses, or you run an investment fund, or you're trying to acquire a business, I believe that Joe's lessons will rewire how you think about leadership, measurement, and motivation. Raising the bar, the real job for a boss, for an owner. A boss's job is to raise the team's quality bar, tell them exactly where they're falling short, and elevate their conception of self. You should expect more from a team than they expect from themselves. That's exactly what Joe have said. That single quote sums up the essence of great leadership, not being liked, but being transformative. Most bosses think their job is to make sure things run smoothly, that the team's happy, that the KPIs are met, that nobody's complaining. But he really flips that idea completely. His job, he says, is to raise the bar, to demand excellence and not apologize for it. Because the truth is, most people, even the talented people, live far below their potential. They're capable of doing so many great things, but they don't see themselves that way. Their conception of self, their identity, is too small. And the job of a great leader is to expand that identity, to make people believe that they can be that kind of person who does world-class work. So raising the bar, the hidden job of leadership. An example, think of Steve Jobs. He was famous or infamous for what he called his reality-distortion field. But what is it really? It was his way of forcing people to abandon the limits of what they thought was possible. When engineers at Apple said something couldn't be done, Jobs would push back, not cruelly for sake of it, but to show them that their decision of impossible was just laziness in this quiz. Andy Hershfer, one of the original Mac engineers, said that working with Jobs was exhausting. But when he looked back, every single thing they said couldn't be done was done. That's the same energy Joe Liemandt built the Trilogy within the 90s, a company that became one of the best training grounds for entrepreneurial talent in tech. People who came out of Trilogy went on to build companies like Indeed and Retail Me Not. Why, you may ask? It's because Liemandt made them believe they were capable of excellence. He built a culture of high standards where mediocrity simply couldn't survive. So you have to tell them exactly where they're falling short. This is the part most leaders avoid. Telling someone exactly where they're falling short is uncomfortable. It requires confrontation, precision, and vulnerability. Most managers sugarcoat feedback. They say things like, you're doing a great job, but maybe just tighten this up a bit. And Joe believes that that's useless. That's ego protection and really not a leadership. And his philosophy is, like many great operators, is radical candor. You must tell people where they're failing, and you must be specific. Think of Bill Walsh, the legendary 49 coach. He used to say, leaders establish the standard of performance, not just the outcome, but the details, how people dress, how they practice, and how they prepare. He was relentless about the precision. Players knew exactly what was expected. When you tell people the truth, where they're falling short, You are doing something profound. You're saying, I believe you can handle this truth. I believe you can improve. That belief itself elevates their conception of self. You're giving them a mirror and you're pretty much saying, this is who you are now, but I see who you could become. Expect more from a team than expect from themselves. Again, that's the hardest and most beautiful part of Liemandt's line. Because when you expect more from people than they expect from themselves, you're taking one kind of moral responsibility. You're saying, I'm going to hold you to a higher standard, even if you resist it, even if you hate me for it. Think about the early days of Amazon. Jeff Bezos famously raised the bar on hiring to near insane levels. Every interview had a bar raiser whose only job was to make sure the person would raise the average and never lower it. Bezos believed that every new hire should improve the cultural DNA, not dilute it. That's why Amazon became a talent magnet. People knew it was hard, but they also knew it meant growth. Or take Warren Buffett. When he hired managers for Berkshire Hathaway subsidiaries, he didn't just hand them budgets. He expected them to think like owners. And Buffett said, I tap dance to work because I only work with people who love what they do and expect excellence from themselves. That's what Liemandt means. Expect more, demand more, because you see something in them they don't see yet. When you make a bold bet, people will think you're insane. Another thing that Joe have said. But what really made people call him insane came years later, when he started ESW Capital. Liemandt made a bet that nobody in the software world understood. He believed that the future of value creation in software wasn't in building new products. It was in acquiring old ones. While Silicon Valley was obsessed with innovation, growth hacking, and venture rounds, Liemandt was quietly buying legacy software companies, products that were past their prime, often ignored, and sometimes shrinking. And he was doing it with ruthless operational discipline. He'd cut bloat, automate processes, centralize functions, and drive profitability. To venture capitalists, that sounded insane. Who wants to buy old software when you can chase the next unicorn? But Liemandt saw something they didn't: recurring revenue, sticky customers, and operational inefficiency hiding cash gold mines. It was a bold bet, and it worked. It worked very well. 2 decades later, ESW owns hundreds of software companies, all throwing off cash, managed by remote teams and operated with playbooks of precision. Liemandt turned insanity into one of the most profitable software companies and software empires in history. And the pattern here, every bold bet looks crazy at first. Again, history is full of examples that prove Liemandt's line to be true. Again, think about Warren Buffett buying Apple in 2016. For decades, Buffett avoided technology. And then suddenly he puts tens of billions into Apple when everyone said the company's growth days were over. People thought he's lost it. But he wasn't betting on gadgets. He was betting on a consumer brand with unmatched loyalty and a cash engine unlike anything in history. Or another example, take Jeff Bezos. With Amazon announced AWS, the idea of retail building a cloud computing business made analytics laugh. Stick to books, they said. AWS went to become one of the most profitable businesses in the world, $1 trillion bold bet that looked insane at the time. Or the last one, take Elon Musk, who risked his entire PayPal fortune on 2 failing ventures, Tesla and SpaceX. By all rational measures, he was lunatic. Hey, a quick break from the podcast. I want to talk about today's very special sponsor, CapitalBad. And why CapitalBad is special is every single week I talk to so many investors who constantly look for good deals. So CapitalBad has created this SMB investment platform that pretty much connects accredited investors with those acquisition entrepreneurs. So more great small businesses end up in the hands of capable operators. That's one side. Another side is that there are sometimes deals and the operators and the searchers keep saying that they can't find capital. So on the other hand, if you're a searcher, you will find capital partners who understand rate environments, covenants, and the grinds of year one. All this on one platform. So, and who knows, maybe you find a great investor for your own deal. And maybe if you are an investor, you can start investing as the minimum ticket is $25,000, but you can go through all those deals and see. Maybe you find something super interested. This site is only for accredited investors and acquisition entrepreneurs only. Nothing here is investment advice. You have to do your own diligence. If that sounds interesting, go to capitalbat.com. I'll also put the link in the show notes so you can create the profile. Go check it out. It's free. Now, back to the episode. An electrical car company in 2008, a private rocket company, both nearly bankrupted him. But Musk's logic was simple. If the probability of success is low, but the payoff changes humanity, the bet is worth it. Every great founder eventually faces that same decision, a moment where everyone says, you're crazy. The price of value, why most companies don't charge enough. That's, again, a famous quote from Joe Liemandt. Most companies' biggest mistake is to not charge enough for what they do. And this is one of those truths that sound simple until you realize how few leaders actually live by it. Joe Liemandt is not talking about being greedy. He's talking about courage. Because pricing, more than marketing, more than product, more than growth, is where fear shows up in business. And that's what he means when he says most companies' biggest mistake is not charging enough. They underprice their product because they undervalue their contribution. What is the philosophy of undervaluing? Many entrepreneurs start out grateful just to have customers. They think, if I just keep prices low, people will buy. It's survival mode. But if you never grow out of that mindset, it becomes a prison. Liemandt saw this pattern across hundreds of software companies he acquired through ESW Capital. He'd buy a 20-year-old business with a stable customer base, maybe 10 million in revenue, and the first thing he'd realize was they haven't raised prices in 10 years. You may ask, why? Well, because the founder was afraid. Afraid of churn, afraid of pushback, afraid of losing goodwill. But when ESW analyzed customer data, they'd find something shocking. Even if prices doubled, less than 10% of customers left. That means 90% of the market was happy to pay more. They just never got the chance. The business wasn't mature. It was malnourished. Value is a story, and you are the author. Liemand's point is that value isn't objective, it's narrative. People don't pay based on cost. They pay based on perceived worth. The best businesses understand that price is communication. It signals quality, confidence, and scarcity. Think of Apple. Their hardware margins are enormous, not because their parts cost more, but because of the story of Apple is design, innovation, and prestige. When Steve Jobs rejoined Apple in 1997, the company was near bankruptcy. Analytics said, make sure you cut prices and compete with Dell. Jobs did the opposite. He raised prices. Why? Because he knew that cheapness communicates weakness. He wanted Apple to be a luxury technology company, not a discount electronics brand. People thought he was crazy, but Apple became the most valuable company in the world by charging more and not less. The ESW playbook, charge for value, not effort. When Joe Liemandt, ESW Capital, buys a software company, one of the first things they do is rethink pricing. They don't care what the market used to pay. They ask, what is this product really worth to the customer? If the software saves a client $100,000 per year, charging just $5,000 is insanity. They move from cost-based pricing to value-based pricing, and they don't apologize for it. That's how ESW turns sleepy software businesses into cash flow machines. The magic isn't in code or marketing, it's in pricing discipline. The courage to charge more. When Liemandt says most companies undercharge, he's also pointing to a leadership problem. Pricing takes courage. Courage to believe in your product. Courage to lose some customers and still stand firm. Jeff Bezos understood this too, but in the reverse. Amazon's low price model wasn't weakness. It was a strategic weapon. Bezos could charge less because his scale and efficiency gave him an unfair advantage. But 99% of businesses don't have Amazon's flywheel. They copy the low price part and forget the strategic leverage behind it. So they cut prices, margins collapse, and they end up working harder for less. Liemandt flips that script. Charge more, work with better customers, deliver excellence. When you raise prices, you don't just make more money. You attract higher quality clients who value what you do. Some of the examples across industries, this idea shows up pretty much everywhere, not just in software. Again, Warren Buffett paid up for quality businesses that could raise prices without losing customers. And he said, the single most important decision in evaluating a business is pricing power. If you can raise prices without losing a business to a competitor, you've got a very good business. That's why he loves Coca-Cola, See's Candy, and American Express. They all have pricing power rooted in emotional attachment. Take Constellation Software, Mark Leonard's empire, where they buy niche software companies that dominate small markets. These businesses have no serious competition, so they can quietly raise prices every year. Customers crumble, but they stay, because switching costs are high and the product is mission critical. Or if you take Starbucks, Howard Schultz kept raising prices even during recessions. Why? Because Starbucks wasn't selling coffee. It was selling identity, routine, and belonging. The $5 latte is a tax on comfort, and people gladly pay it. The real bottleneck, motivation over information. The core bottleneck in education doesn't have to do with information delivery, which is what most people focus on. It has to do with motivation. It doesn't matter how effective your teaching is if students aren't motivated to learn in the first place. Joe Liemandt's quote sounds like it's about schools, but it's really about how people grow. And that makes it one of the most important ideas in business, management, and investing. Because whether you're teaching students, managing a team, or leading a portfolio company, you're always in the business of education, of transferring knowledge and behavior. And Liemandt's point is brutally simple. You can have the best curriculum, systems, and incentives in the world, but none of it matters if the people you're leading aren't motivated to learn. The myth of better information. For decades, education reformers have focused on information delivery. They've obsessed over the textbooks, better teachers, better online courses, better apps. But Liemandt pointed out what's hiding in plain sight. The problem isn't access to information. It's the desire to use it. We live in a world where anyone can learn almost anything, and they can do it for free. But the world is still full of people who don't. So the limiting factor isn't knowledge, it's drive. And that's not just true in education, it's also true in every business on earth. And motivation as the ultimate leverage. Think about this like this. A motivated person with average intelligence will outperform a brilliant person with no motivation. And this is true like every single time. You can see this everywhere in business. When Joe Liemandt was building Trilogy in 1990s, he recruited some of the best young minds in America. Not just programmers, but deeply ambitious people who wanted to win. He understood that you can teach someone how to code, but you can't teach them to care. That's why Trilogy became a legendary training ground. People like Garrett L.G., who's the Oracle Japan CEO. Next is Steve Sine, who's the founder of Concur. And Michael Dell's top executives came from that ecosystem. It wasn't because Trilogy had secret knowledge. It's because it had fire. Liemandt knew motivation was the multiplier, and everything else was noise. The Buffett analogy, inner scorecard. Warren Buffett often says he looks for people with an inner scorecard, people who are driven by internal standards rather than external rewards. That's motivation. That's what Liemandt is talking about. You can't motivate someone like that with bonuses, perks, or slogans. They're motivated by the act of getting better, of providing something to themselves. Buffett built Berkshire Hathaway around this principle. He gives autonomy to managers because they're self-motivated. They don't need someone looking over their shoulder. If you have to teach motivation, you're already lost. The corporate parallel, thinking versus belief. Most companies make the same mistake educators make. They assume performance problems are knowledge problems. So they pour money into training, consultants, playbooks, and onboarding systems. But all of that is wasted if people aren't internally engaged. It's like teaching someone how to drive when they have no interest in getting in the car. Mark Leonard at Constellation Software understands this very well. When he acquires a company, he doesn't just look for a competent management. He looks for intrinsically motivated people. People who don't need micromanagement. People who want to win the game for its own sake. That's why Constellation can acquire hundreds of companies and still run lean. They don't need bureaucracy to compensate for lack of drive. When motivation beats management. There's a story about Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. He'd walk into stores at 5 a.m. and talk to clerks stocking shelves. He'd ask them what they thought of pricing, layout, and products, and then he's been taking notes. He didn't care about titles. He cared about energy. He wanted people who cared about the business like owners. And that's the same lesson Liemandt is pointing to. You can't systemize excellence without first igniting motivation. Once people care, they'll seek out information themselves. But if they don't, no amount of training will save you. Information is commodity. Motivation is scarcity. And that's the world we live in right now. Knowledge has zero marginal cost. Anyone can access this. But motivation, the drive to actually apply knowledge, that's scarce. And scarcity creates value. Liemandt's insight reframes how we think about teams. The rarest asset in business isn't skill, it's self-driven people. That's why Trilogy and ESW Capital were designed to attract and amplify that type of person. They created environments where ambition was rewarded and mediocrity was uncomfortable, where people who wanted to learn were given infinite runway, and people who didn't were quickly filtered out. That's how you build elite cultures over the years. Leaders as motivators. If you run a holding company, your real job isn't just allocating capital, it's allocating motivation. You're constantly transferring energy through standards, through your vision, through your storytelling. Here's an example. Look at Steve Jobs. He didn't just teach, he inspired. He made people believe they were building something that mattered. Or if you take Phil Knight at Nike, he said the company wasn't about shoes, it was about honoring athletes. That motivation squeezed as mission. Liemandt is saying, don't focus so much on teaching, focus on the spark. Because once someone is lit up, they'll teach themselves. The hidden lessons for operators. If you lead teams, think about this every day. Are your people learning because they have to or because they want to? Are you designing systems that reward compliance or curiosity? Are you feeding motivation or training it with bureaucracy? Liemandt's point is that the future belongs to organizations that can ignite internal drive, not manage people, but motivate them. That's what makes education and business truly scale. And on closing, lighting the fire. So when Joe Liemandt says the bottleneck in education isn't information delivery, it's motivation, again, he's describing a universal principle. You can't pour knowledge into an unmotivated mind, and you can't build a great company out of unmotivated people. Your job as a leader isn't to dump more information into your organization. It's to light fires. Because once people are motivated, everything else becomes easy. And if you're not, nothing else works. And that's the bottleneck. That's the challenge. And that's the opportunity for every holdco builder, investor, capital allocator, business builder. Your customers have all the answers. Again, your customers have all the answers. At most school events, the principal will sit with the parents. Joe sits with kids and asks them questions the entire time. That quote might maybe be the purest example of how Joe Liemandt thinks. simple, humble, and ruthlessly effective. Many people in leadership positions want to look smart. Liemandt wants to get smart. And the way you get smart is by listening, not to consultants, not to spreadsheets, not to your ego, but to the people who actually live the experience. In the context of his school, it's the kids. In the context of business, it's the customers. The curse of distance. Here's what happens in most organizations. As a company grows, leaders move further and further away from reality. The founder who once spoke to customers every day now manages managers who manage other managers. Feedback turns into reports, reports into the metrics, and metrics into the abstractions. That's when the decay begins. You start making decisions based on proxies instead of truth. And that's what Liemandt refuses to do. He knows the only way to stay grounded is to go directly to the source, to sit with the kids, not the parents. Because the kids, the end users, don't speak in abstractions. They tell you exactly what's working and what is not working. And the power of first-hand feedback, think about how rare that is in business. Most and many CEOs of 100+ million companies never speak directly to customers anymore because the company is too large. But the best builders, the ones who sustain excellence for decades, they never stop listening to the end user. And Steve Jobs, he used to walk into Apple stores unannounced and talk to customers trying out products. He wanted to see confusion on their faces, to spot friction. Howard Schultz did the same thing at Starbucks. He'd sit in cafes, quietly observing. Were the customers lingering? Were they smiling? Did the barista make eye contact? Things like that. He was reading emotional data. Again, not dashboards. Jeff Bezos used to keep an empty chair in Amazon meetings to represent the customer. He'd ask, what would the customer say about this? And that's not symbolism, it's discipline. It's a ritual reminder that the answers are out there, not in here. The biggest thing for me was that companies are not charging enough because of being afraid of losing customers, but it's actually the exact opposite. By charging more, you can hire better people, which provide a better service to our customers. So it's like a great flywheel in most cases. Obviously, in Amazon's case, it's different, but not all of us are building Amazon. And another lesson was about finding those special people who you don't even need to educate because all the information is out there. And if they enjoy and like what they do, they will find this information, and your only job is to just leave them alone because they will come back to you with all the, even if there are problems, they'll come back to you with those problems already solved because they're exceptional people, and your only job is to find those people and just leave them alone and let them do the job. So today's episode, I would say, to sum it up again, it's lessons from Joe Liemandt, how to build, how to scale, and how to reinventing systems from the first principle. I found this to be super interesting. I was doing this research on him, listening to different podcasts he's been on. It's not too many of them, to be honest. So if you're first time in here, make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, and thanks for listening, and see you in the next one.